Hello everyone and welcome back to Lords of Infinity. So in the last episode, we had some tragedy, basically go ahead and strike our fief. We also had some good things that happened too in the process. We managed to get some Antar settlers that managed to come in and have settled themselves on in our fief. We managed to help them out and so on and so forth, but that caused some tensions, which then kind of led to a bit of a dispute at the end there at our little harvest festival. But hopefully we can go ahead and kind of make things a little bit better going forward, and hopefully some of the tensions will calm down, but we'll see, how things go. I also will say too that since the last time I recorded, because I think I recorded this all Monday. Yeah, I think I recorded all this Monday, maybe Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. But I did go ahead and play a little bit of the demo in my own spare time, and I played the opposite path where you go ahead and you go into this, you remain in the capital to try and oversee certain things. And my God, it's a lot of stuff going on there. There's a lot of stuff going on there. I was thoroughly surprised at how much was going on. I also didn't realize that the demo was this long too. I mean, the demo, it might be the whole game for all I know, or just about the entire game. But yeah, I didn't expect for it to be as long as it actually ended up being. But I don't think I'm going to go ahead and play the entire demo. I might play up to a certain point and then I'll cut it off at there. And then when the full game actually comes out, then I'll go ahead and jump into it. But yeah, there's a lot going on. I really can't wait to go ahead and actually play the full game when it comes out with my actual saves and everything, because yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I'm curious to see also how this affects things since I stayed at home, because naturally with you staying at home, you don't get drawn into a lot of the politics going on at the courts. So that's going to be very interesting to see how this all kind of balances out. So yeah, well, I guess we'll just go ahead and jump back into it now. All right. By your reckoning, your fief has lost 8 households. We have chosen to leave your fief out of dissatisfaction with your policies and decisions. Furthermore, your fief has also lost 4 households. We have left in search of better opportunities elsewhere. The process of clearing debris from the disused plots on your fief is now complete, ready to be used come next spring. With patience and care, they will no doubt much improve the output of your lands, though the poor soil of the Salt Coast will make any improvement marginal at best. In addition, you receive a letter from your bankers who inform you that in light of your current circumstances, they have agreed to lower the interest rate on your debt by 2%. However, it is clear enough to you that they do so only begrudgingly. You doubt they will acquiesce as readily the next time you make a similar request. That was also another thing too in my in the playthrough I did in my spare time. I basically went bankrupt because I had took out so many loans, and they were really huge loans, but that's what it's just really hard to turn around and kind of manage things when you're in the capital, especially if you don't have any actual money on your own. Because you have to also rent an apartment in the capital. And I chose to rent an apartment in the capital that was closer to one of my allies, which kind of helped me work out some more political things and stuff like that, but it cost a lot of money. I think I was losing like negative 2,000 every half year. So as you can imagine, I went bankrupt pretty quickly, even though there weren't a whole lot of events that could actually help me out. I don't know if there are any random events that actually pops up and kind of helps you out, but yeah, I didn't get any type of events that had any opportunities for money or anything like that. So, but maybe I was just talking to the wrong people. Who knows? Not sure. But yeah, next time if I do that, I'm probably going to get a cheaper house somewhere and trying to see if I can manage that a lot more. And there's also another thing too I forgot to mention as well, which was one of the decisions. So one of the decisions in Guns of Infinity I mentioned before is that you can capture Lady Alexandra, which is I think she's either the wife or the daughter of Prince Corbirid, if I'm not mistaken. And if you get her, you get a very hefty bounty. And if I'm not mistaken, the bounty is like 25,000 crowns, which if you look at how much you actually owe, you can effectively wipe out your debt and have some to spare. But you have to have just the right stats in order to turn around and pull that off. And I don't even know like what other things will affect you too in the process. But yeah, 25,000 crowns, you can completely pay off that debt. And yeah, I might go ahead and play with that again in my own spare time to see how that affects other things as far as the testing phase goes. But yeah, that's just 25,000 crowns. Good God. So yeah. All right. Okay, so we're back here to the management. We're at negative 459 crowns. And I think that's down from, what was it, 600 and something crowns I think it was before. Or I may be messing up some stats here because I'm still trying to remember things from the last game that I played in my spare time. So yeah, how much do I actually have to? Because I thought the amount that I actually had to pay as far as the interest goes was pretty low. But let's see. Perhaps I should send some money back. Oh no, I only have like 1,000. So yeah, I'm just gonna have to continue making improvements. What improvements can I make to the house and grounds? You spend some time in assessing the current status of your ancestral home, marshaling reports, cost estimates, and your own observations. You narrow your options down to those immediately feasible. You shall have to choose carefully, for any physical labor involved will have to be done by the men of your fief, and only so many will be able to spare the time away from their fields. If you mean to commit to a project, then you shall not have the workmen to spare on a second until the first is complete. Though your manor's foundations remains more or less sound, the same could not be said about much of its structure. Much abused after generations of neglect, in between the broken windows, rotting floorboards, and serious draughts, a third of the house might well be uninhabitable, if not outright on the verge of collapse. Passers-by need only look at the weathered and dilapidated exterior to gain some appreciation of how badly your family has fallen on hard times. If nothing else, you would certainly need to shore up the house before planning any addition or further renovations. You you estimate the cost to be around 500 crown. Let me see. At the moment, the stone wall around the manor is more tumble-down ruin than effective perimeter. Not only does it serve as a horrendous eyesore, it also allows admittance to any intruder who may wish to do you or your household harm. For perhaps 250 crown, you could have the wall fully repaired and restored to a condition where it may serve as something more than a pile of stones. The state of your stables and coach house were atrocious even before you left for the war. Now, however, you have the means to do something about it. For 500 crown or so, you could fully repair both buildings, rendering them once again proof against the elements. No doubt such measures will improve the appearance of your estate, not to mention the living conditions of your horses. Okay. I kind of want to do that perimeter wall, but at the same time, I think I really need to kind of focus on the fief right now, because I think the last thing I want to do is work on the housing situation, especially now since we have more people in the fief. Let me see. I just picked the same thing. I picked the same thing. Jesus. Okay. Village. Okay. So yeah, we can't do the roads thing. Again, I don't know if that's because it's just not implemented or because it's, of course, the money situation. I think it was actually the money situation. Let me see. What does it say now? While all the disused plots of lands on your fief have now been cleared, there is always the possibility of clearing yet more land to allow for yet more crops to grow. This time, however, the task will be considerably harder. The land to be cleared has never been under cultivation, and it will be boulders, stumps, and old growth which you have to clear out. The cost might exceed 1,500 crown, but the increase in land under the plow might make the measures well worth it. I haven't seen so just yet. All right. Though your tenants have the right to live in your cottages, it is your responsibility to maintain them. Unfortunately, this has been a task which has been performed indifferently at best over the past few decades. As a result, many of your tenants' dwellings are in a wretched state, their walls crumbling and their chimneys leaking. If you could perhaps commit 250 crown or so to pay for repairs, the problem could be much improved. Yeah, the school just kind of seems like it's not going to be really well worth it. And while I would like to do the open square, I don't, yeah, the open square to kind of protect against the elements, I don't know how good of a thing that's gonna be. So I think I'll work on the houses. Yeah, I'll work on the houses. You make a note to set aside the appropriate funds and draft a call for workmen to be posted in the village square. The winter snows will make it impossible to begin work until the beginning of spring, but by then you should have everything in readiness to start construction in earnest. Until then, all you can do is wait. Yeah, I think it's going in pretty much about a year intervals, and I'm not too sure about that because, again, not too many options or not too many opportunities are coming up in order to get more wealth and stuff like that. And or maybe I'm actually just missing something. I'm not sure. But yeah, I kind of wish there was in quarters as opposed or in seasons as opposed to just every turn being just about a year. Yeah, I'm still at 459 crowns. How much is my debt right now? My debt is, I guess I can't see it on this screen. Yeah, my debt is still at 1800. Well, I'll just leave that I'll just leave that for right now. I won't take out any more loans just yet. Hopefully this will start improving and I can actually go into the positive at some point. Finish managing the estate and continue. Winter strikes hard and fast this year. One day the weather seems no colder or wetter than any other autumn day. The next, you wake to the howling of a freezing wind and the sight of the whole world covered overnight in a fresh blanket of snow. As the days pass, the weather seems to only get colder. The snow only piles higher. Your valet tells you that he has not seen such weather in over 20 years. Your time in Antar, on the other hand, have made you rather more familiar with such conditions, not that it makes them any more tolerable. There can be no question of travel this winter. You will be fortunate to even leave the house before spring comes, which means keeping yourself occupied in the intervening months may prove quite the challenge indeed. Let's see. I will not. Yeah, I won't go ahead and dally with my siblings right now. And I won't write the memoirs since I haven't actually started them in this playthrough. I'll go ahead and try and keep fit. The prospect is not as simple as it sounds. It will not be easy finding ways to apply yourself in conditions like these. Without access to the outdoors, to news of the outside world, to any society of all, save that available within your home, your remaining options are paltry at best, tortuously boring at worst. Yet it is times like this when you must be most on guard against complacency. Allow yourself to begin slipping into indolence simply because of a harsh winter, and you will find yourself making the same excuses during a mild one, if not in even milder weather, until dissipation, not readiness, becomes your customary attitude. No, you have resolved yourself to your ends. Now you must merely choose the means. Let me see. A program of rigorous exercise will help me stay in physical shape. I think I'm going to go ahead and work on my mind. Yeah, I'll work on my mind because it went down quite a bit. Charisma, actually, I don't think it's went down that much. But yeah, I'll work on my mind. You suppose it is for the best. The snows of winter leave you more or less confined to your home anyway, so why not at least put the confinement to some profitable use? Unfortunately, that is easier said than done. Your family can boast more than a few of literary or intellectual temperament in its vast history, but very little of their collections have survived to the current day. There are a few titles actually worth reading among the whole mess, and those are quickly exhausted. You cannot help but think wistfully back to the vast collection of the Duke of Canaris, who had taken his books with him even to war. What you would do for such a library right now. Did that help my intellect a bit? Oof, doesn't look like it did. You witnessed the coming of spring with no small amount of trepidation. Yeah, did it actually do anything? It did not, and it actually just made my charisma Even worse. Wonderful. Let me see. Oh, there's relief as well. A certain pleasure of knowing that you are no longer locked inside your home by frigid fetters of snow and ice, but it had been that same snow and ice which had kept your tenants and the Antari indoors among their own people as well. With the coming of the winter thaw, they will be once again free to go outdoors, to mingle amongst each other, and to give opportunity for fresh discord. The violent events of the last year's high harvest still weigh heavily on your mind, and you cannot imagine that such incidents will flare up again before long. That is not the least of your concerns either. When the Antari had arrived last summer, you had allowed them to stay in empty cottages on your estate free of charge. With the year too late for planting, it was the only practical thing to do at the time, but it could hardly be a permanent solution. Now that a new growing season has begun, you have no excuse to give them any further special treatment. They must pay their rents like all your other tenants. You don't suppose they'll be very happy about that. Sure enough, when you announce to the Antari of their new obligations, you are met with no small amount of grumbling. Some of them even begin to pack up and leave, evidently more willing to seek their fortune in the open country again than pay for their place in your fief. As for the rest, they pay what you are owed obediently, if not quite enthusiastically, something which actually seems to improve their standing among your more established tenants. Now that the Antari must pay their rent like everyone else, there's no reason for others to see them as foreign freeloaders. Not that it stops a few incorrigible bigots doing so, of course. You suppose that they will take longer to come around, if at all. Yet, despite the continuing complaints of a few holdouts, the hostility betwixt the two groups even seems to lessen over the next few weeks, if only a little. Word even begins to spread throughout the borders of your fief that Lord Rumburg has managed to successfully settle a band of Antara refugees on his land. Perhaps a rosier accounting of events than the reality, but it certainly doesn't do your reputation harm. At last, things seem to be looking up. For a while, you even begin to think that the situation of your fiefdom might even be heading towards something acceptable species of peace. Okay. That is at least until one morning, when you look out the window to see one of your tenants coming up the path from the village at full sprint, his eyes wide. "We're under attack," he screams, voice shrill with panic as you step into the courtyard. You hold him steady as he staggers into your arms, body sagging from exertion, heaving with great ragged breaths. "What's happened?" you demand with a crisp precision that comes to you as natural as breathing. "Who's attacking?" He points frantically into the distance behind him, shaking, babbling. "They came out of the woods. They shot Cal and calm yourself, Sarah," you snap, sharp words connecting with all the force of a slap to the face. Who is attacking?" Trembling, he looks up at you, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper. "Roadsmen." Interesting. So when I was playing in my spare time, I did encounter an event where I actually did run into some roadsmen, but it was actually on the way to Atoria. I'm not sure if this is going to play out the same way. In that particular playthrough, I actually managed to convince them to return home and work for me instead. Hopefully I can do the same thing here, but my stats are a little different and I don't have as much charm as I once had. So I might not be able to pull this off. So we'll see. Wait, you mean to tell me that only got me minus... That only helped me out by 100? Ugh, alright. What, is one person paying 1 crown? Jesus. Or half a crown? At first glance, the funeral is like every country what? At first glance, the funeral is like every country funeral you have ever seen before. The small crowd in the market square, the heaped up pile of rough timber stacked into a rough pyre in the middle, a small cluster of friends carrying the wrapped up bundle of the dead man's body to the oil soaked wood, as his widow and children stand aside and look on with the sort of dignified, silent composure expected of them. It seems no different than the half dozen which seem to happen every year, when a sickly child doesn't survive a fever, or an aged heart finally gives out. But there's a difference in the air today. As the torch is brought to the pyre and the flames leap through the clear spring afternoon, a fear in the expressions of your tenants, a fear in their eyes. You have seen the like before, in Antar, and all too often. It is that muddled and terrible confusion of hope and dread that reigns after a battle, after the fighting is done and the dead are burned. Hope that the worst might now be over. Dread that it isn't. You can pick out the optimists among your people, the ones who seem relieved the whole thing is over than anything else. You know what they are telling themselves, that this attack was a freak accident, that no right-thinking person would shoot a man in the back as he was tending his fields, that such pointless death is the exception, not the rule, as it must be in any just universe. They think that it is over now, that the ordeal is past. You know that because once, long ago, you had thought like they did. 3 days later, a party returning from the market stagger into the village square, their clothes torn and their faces twisted in terror. They tell a story of robbery in the woods, a threat delivered at the end of a pistol, the threat of violence, of murder, of worse. The news sends shockwaves through the little community in your charge. If the roads leading out are no longer safe, then your fief is all but cut off, with no way to sell produce or buy the imports needed to keep every farm and every shop running. By the end of the day, 3 sets of petitioners visit you in your manor. Some are manic with fear, others turgid with an anxious bellicosity. Yet their demands are the same. Something must be done. The key, I believe, would be to maintain a sense of calm as much as possible, Sandersley tells you when you bring the subject up to him at dinner. A situation like this needs a concerted, coordinated response, and the last thing we could possibly want at a moment like this is to spread a panic, especially once things get worse. You seem very certain, your mother observes, that things will get worse, I mean. Your solicitor lets out a resigned sigh. It is in my experience, madam, that it is better to plan for the worst and hope for the best. That's fair. If that's the case, then why not declare a state of emergency, your brother suggests. If things really do get bad, then wouldn't it be better to be more prepared than less? Sandersley shakes his head. The problem is, young master, that declaring an emergency would create a panic and make the situation less stable than it is. It would also justify any drastic measures my brother might be willing to take, Carlos replies. Should he, for example, mean to cancel the season's rents so that our tenants may be less injured by the loss of trade and customs? Or should he mean to levy extra rents so that he may embody the house guard and deal with their menace directly? Your sister fixes you with a hard look. Better our tenants' coin go to the defense of their own lives and livelihoods than into pockets of some wretched brigand. Sandersley looks to you with a look of resignation. I cannot recommend it, my lord, but the decision is yours regardless. Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I think if I was more of a military-minded character, I would probably go ahead and just do a state of emergency. But at the same time, these two options don't seem very good. I feel like, oof. Because, like, this is the middle ground, but this is essentially the same as this. It would be different if it was just like, you know, if we were to wait, what options do we have? As opposed to just being like, all right, we'll just wait and see. No, we need to proactively do something. We need to, you know, I don't know, try and build up some defenses or see if we can turn around and, you know, do some scouting or something. This is just waiting to react. And this is just trying to put on a facet of nothing is wrong. So in this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and declare an emergency. I don't like this particularly with this character, but I'll go ahead and do it. Sandersley nods gravely. I see, my lord, he replies, his disapproval quite evident. I shall draw up an announcement for tomorrow. Yet even so, it is clear that he has something else to say. What is it, Sandersley? If my lord wishes to enact some further measure, it will be best to include the news in the same announcement, he replies. It will serve to associate the measure with the exigency. Oof. Announce that I mean to raise a partial emergency levy, 1 crown per household, Make it known that I am calling for a full emergency levy, an additional 6 months rent, or I mean to offer relief in my tenants. No rents will be paid for this past 6 months. If yeah, I don't think I'm I don't think I'm doing that. Let's see. My reputation is a 62, health is a 65. I think I can get away with pulling this off. 1 crown per household, or an additional 6 months. I'll push it. I'll do an additional 6 months. Sandersley does not quite offer an objection. He limits himself only to the slightest air of disapproval. Your brother is not too phlegmatic. You can't do this, he protests. The tenants will need all the aid they can be that can be spared if they are to be cut off from any ability to sell their goods. If you make them pay twice the rent, they'll starve. And if the roadsmen are allowed to do as they please, they will starve anyway, you retort. I mean to end this crisis swiftly, but to do so, I shall need all the resources I can muster. Do you deny it? Your brother looks away, unwilling to answer, his eyes narrowed in anger. I believe this to be a necessary measure, you insist. The tenants shall have to understand. Some of them do, but only some. The announcement of the state of emergency raises some disquiet, as Sandersley had warned you, but it is the emergency levy which raises the most furor. The complaints you receive are vocal and many, but you hold your ground. If the threat of the roadsmen is as severe as you have cause to fear it is, then you cannot compromise your ability to combat it simply because someone has asked you to. Thankfully, their dissent does not stop your tenants from delivering their extra rents. Either they understand the threat of the crisis poses, or they are at least for now willing to trust your ability to handle it. Whatever the reason, the result is a substantial emergency fund, a solid reserve to fall back upon should things get worse. I wonder how much that reserve is. It seems that I'm at 1,726. Okay, don't know what that really means, but all right. Yet as the days go on, no roadsmen come spilling out of the woods. No fresh news of attacks cross your desk. With every passing day, the stench of fear, which had come so raw and so fresh in those first early days, floats away bit by bit until it can be barely smelled at all. After a week, some of your most intrepid tenants even try to make the trip to the market town down the roads. They go armed with pistols, pitchforks, and the most fearful of anxieties, but when they return without incident, those that follow them take no such precautions and return no less unharmed. When the intendancy courier arrives with fresh letters from your bankers a few days later, he reports no sign of brigands at all on the road surrounding your fief. Perhaps the crisis is well and truly over. You can only hope, as you turn your attention away from the roadsmen and towards the more mundane business of managing your estate. Right? By your reckoning, your fief has attracted 1 new rent-paying household over the past 6 months. Unfortunately, you have also lost 8 households who have chosen to leave your fief out of dissatisfaction with your policies and decisions. Furthermore, your fief has also lost 3 households who have left in search of better opportunities elsewhere. Your tenants are reporting great satisfaction with the state of their newly repaired cottages, enough perhaps to compensate them for the great discomfort they had to endure throughout the weeks of spring as your workmen reinforced cracked walls, rebuilt draughty chimneys, and replaced rotting beams. Okay. In addition, reports come to you that a group of merchants from Crittenden have recently visited your fief looking for new opportunities and sources of trade goods. Unfortunately, the rather questionable reputation which your fief maintains among the people of the region convinced them to look elsewhere, meaning that your neighbors are likely to enjoy the fruits of increased commerce while your own lands fall behind. It is hardly welcome news. Okay. I didn't have much to do with that, I guess. I mean, it says my reputation is a 62, and my health is a 65. What does the barony of Rumburg say? Respectability is a 31, prosperity is a 34, contentment is a 37. Wonderful. Let's see. Manner. That's gonna be terrible. That's not gonna be changed from earlier. Let me see. Being a barony of middling size composed of a manor house, market village, and surrounding fields and hinterlands is located, blah, 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 blah. The village of Rumburg is a small hamlet possessed of travelers in, blah, blah, blah. The surrounding cottages are few in number. Fields bound the village on all sides, and all available land is under cultivation. Okay. Let's see. And I'm currently at a balance of negative 79. So, yeah, okay. And I only have 173 rent-paying households. Wonderful. That is wonderful. So yeah, I need more of those. And I'm not really getting many opportunities for that, but all right. Let's see, I'm still at 1,367. I guess now with that being a thing, I'll try and improve the manor house. Let's see. And I'll improve that wall at the very least. Okay. By the time summer begins, you should have the materials and labor necessary to begin work in earnest. Until then, all you can do is wait. Okay. And I don't think I'm going to do anything. Yeah, I can't really do anything else. So I kind of want to pay on the loans, but I mean, my debt is ridiculously high, and the slightest little thing, it's not going to do much. If I can put down 30 or something, it's not going to do a whole lot. So yeah. Finish managing the estate and continue. Beginning of the next week, 3 market parties head off down the road. Within 2 days, all of them return, bruised, bloodied, and deprived of all their goods and carts. When you question them, the stories they tell are all the same. The crash of musketry from the woods, a horde of rough-looking, heavily armed men swarming out of the underbrush, a scuffle, a robbery, a panic flight back to the village. The details are different in each retelling, but the cold, terrible heart of each one is the same. The Roadsmen are back, in large numbers and possessed of a determination to rob and despoil every party traveling to or from your lands. Your fief is effectively under siege. Word spreads almost instantly. The fear that had almost faded away now returns, coupled with the sharp reek of certainty. There is no question as to the severity of the crisis now, or the intention of those behind it. You must take action. See, this is kind of irritating. So, why would you, if you're going to go ahead and do a state of emergency, and I'm assuming this all passed in about a year, well, a few months or so. If you're going to have a state of emergency, why wouldn't you turn around and send out scouting parties? Why wouldn't you start trying to go ahead and draft some of the villagers and so on and so forth? Why wouldn't you try and drill some of the men and stuff like that? But why would you just sit in the house, collect the money, and that be the end of it? So that was kind of pointless. That was kind of stupid. So yeah, I don't really understand the process behind that. That just seems kind of dumb, because I know if I was in that situation, I would go ahead and start making proper preparations, try and make, you know, some type of barricades or something around the village and try and get some people out there to see what's going on. Not just wait until the, you know, the mailman comes by and says, oh yeah, I didn't run into anybody in the process, and just sit on my laurels. Now, if I had made that choice, that would have been fine, but I didn't. I declared a state of emergency and I didn't do anything, but all right. As you see it, you have 3 options. Under normal circumstances, dealing with brigands is the intendancy's business. In theory, the correct course of action would be to report your situation immediately to the nearest office in Crittenden, and then to await whatever aid they might be able to offer to resolve the crisis. In practice, it may prove a fool's errand. Even if you could get a rider through the roadmen's infested woods, the aid you hope for may never materialize. The king's intendancy is not an office well known for its abundance of resources. Burdened with almost all of the duties of royal governance, perennially underfunded and understaffed, the intendancy may take weeks or months to muster a response, if they have the means at their disposal to deliver one at all. Then there's the possibility of negotiation. As repugnant as it may seem, if you are able to bring them to the negotiating table, perhaps with the promise of amnesty as a show of good faith, then you might be able to talk them into leaving your fief alone. Of course, they will almost certainly demand something in return, a gift, they might call it, or a contribution. In short, a ransom. It does not sit well with you, but perhaps it would be better if if they take the coin from your coffers willingly than from your tenants by brute force, and it may be the only way to avoid bloodshed. Then there's the riskiest option of them all. You might choose to embody your house guard, recruiting your tenants into a private army to deal with the roadsman's problem in the most direct and forceful way at your disposal. You would be well within your right to do so, and you cannot deny that some part of you yet yearns to return to some semblance of that time in your life when you led men into battle, when you traded in gunpowder and steel, not petitions and contracts. But you are not an Antar anymore. Those you would be riding against would inevitably be your own countrymen. Those that you would lead against them would not be fully equipped professional soldiers, but your tenants, men with no experience of battle, men who you ought to be protecting, not sending into mortal peril. Perhaps it would be like going to war again, but it would not be the war you once knew. I mean, when you think about it, it's essentially the same situation that happened after Blagia, because we basically had nothing but thieves, criminals, and whatever else that was left over. So, I mean, just about the same thing. Also, I would like a fourth option where you could either, and go ahead and try and, build up your forces, but also try to secretly send some type of letter to the intendancy to let them know what's going on, or try to negotiate and try and drag it out for a while, but also send a letter to the intendancy requesting for aid, or call on some of the people that you are friends with. That might be nice, but I guess they can't help you either in these situations. Oh well. Embody the house guard. I mean to defend my fief. Hopefully this will turn out all right. It is not, strictly speaking, a regular occurrence for a lord of your station to embody his house guard. Certainly, only the wealthiest country barons possess the income necessary to sustain the exceptional expense of a permanent force of professional soldiers of any size, let alone the sort of small private armies of men like the Earl of Castermaine and the Viscount Hugh, the sort which you had fought alongside in Antar when they had been mobilized into the king's army. No, for your family, the house guard has only ever been considered an emergency measure, and even then as one too expensive for all the greatest of crises. Thank you for telling me that now. So distant was the very memory of the last occasion it was exercised that you were obliged to direct Sandersley to root through your family's old archives so you can even find a copy of the last order of embodiment given out by a Baron Rumburg, a document drafted during King Ulrich's war by your great-grandfather. But as much as you might like to contemplate the historical significance of what you're about to do, the roadsmen in the forest remain a very real threat, and one which cannot be put off. You waste no time in drafting an announcement, calling for volunteers who would be willing to submit temporarily to military discipline in the defense of their fief. You call on them to muster in the village square at noon next day. You sign the thing not with your title, but with your rank and regiment. Major Darren de All Dracon, the Royal Dragoons. Let them remember that you are no amateur when it comes to leading men into battle. Then all you can do is order Sandersley to make the announcement and wait. The next morning, you arrive in the village square in full uniform with the saber belted to your side and your plumed dragoon helmet tucked under one arm. As noon approaches, you wait for volunteers to arrive. You keep waiting for a long time. It cannot be that your announcement had gone unheeded. You can see your tenants making conscious efforts to avoid you as you stand in the square. Some give you a wide berth, others simply touch the brims of their hats and mutter a respectful "my lord" before scuttling off as fast as their legs can carry them, their steps no doubt expedited by guilt and shame. Every person you come across flees before you have the opportunity to confront them with the reason of your presence, as if you were a particularly reviled street beggar. You continue to wait in the square long into the afternoon until it becomes clear that nobody is coming. In the end, you return home disappointed without a single volunteer. For all that your tenants have complained and petitioned and demanded solutions regarding the roadsman problem, it comes as a rather rude shock that none of them seem particularly interested in subjugating themselves to the slightest risk in combating it. Yet, no matter your personal feelings on the matter, the fact remains. You cannot face the roadsmen without a force of your own. If you cannot attract volunteers through an appeal to their ideas of collective responsibility and communal loyalty, then you shall have to resort to other means. Okay. I'm not giving them shit. I'm sorry. This is ridiculous. Like, you want to get killed? Come on, guy. All right. Let's see. Perhaps the promise of coin will succeed where civic duty has failed. A direct appeal for volunteers may have more of an effect than an announcement. If they will not come willingly, I will simply order them to. I don't even know if I have enough ruthlessness to pull this off. Yeah, and I don't know, like, if a particular stat lords over that or anything. Yeah, I mean, I guess if it was me, I would just go ahead and just start ordering them too. Because I mean, I don't really have the money to turn around and do anything. I'm pretty sure it would cost quite a bit of money to try and order and try and pay everyone. God. This whole situation is just, oof. Now I wish I was back in Atoria. I will. I guess I'll try coin. I mean, I guess I'll just have to take out a loan later on. Hope I can get a fairly decent one. Jesus. In your somewhat extensive experience on the subject, there's nothing that can compel a man to fight quite like the promise of pay. True, there was honor of the regiment to consider, and crown and country, and all the other fine and noble things which had inspired your men to feats of heroism on the battlefields of Antar, but it had been the idea of regular pay which had got them there in the first place. So the next day you make a second announcement. This time you promise a bounty of 4 crown to any volunteer willing to join your house guard, and another 2 crown a month for the duration of the crisis. It is less than what your dragoons have been paid in Antar, but not by much, more than a job warrants by your reckoning. Still, you are hardly in a position to negotiate. Better to make an over-generous offer than to make an overly stingy one and be made a fool a second time. It works. This time, when you call for volunteers, more than 24 men of your fiefs show up, armed with a bewildering array of fowling pieces, hunting muskets, pitchforks, and other improvised pole arms. They present themselves with an almost exaggerated enthusiasm, even more so once you begin handling out the first part of their pay. These men may not fight for you or your fief, but they will fight for your gold. You suppose that will have to be good enough. You have your house guard. Now all you have to do is turn them into a fighting force worthy of the name. This quickly proves more difficult than you had first anticipated. You thought you had seen bad soldiering before, but even the raw recruits your regiment had received in Antar near the end of the war at least understood the words of command and the basic rudiments of the manual of arms. Here, even a command as simple as the order to stand to attention results in a fumbling mess as men prod each other with the makeshift weapons and stumble into a ridiculous array of stances, none particularly correct. Your perhaps overly optimistic attempts to order something more complex, like a right face, or present arms, inevitably devolves into the most shambolic confusion. What might even be worse is your new house guard's seemingly constitutional inability to maintain any form of discipline. Even if you get them formed up into ranks, it is only a few moments before they are broken up into their own knots once again, chatting and laughing and otherwise showing a mild contempt for even the very ideal of martial order. You could only imagine how useful a good sergeant would be right now, a leather-lunged brute to bellow and chivvy and cajole the men into position, and then keep them there through nothing but the threat and occasional application of his fist. But all the good sergeants you know are in Fernandad's court with the dragoons, or dead on the fields of Blagia and Caringia, and the sight of 100 other half forgotten far across the Caligian Sea. No, if you mean to turn this collection of willful farmers into something even close to resembling soldiers, you shall have to do it on your own, with not but your own resources, experience, and determination. You can only hope that you will have the time to do so before your efforts are put to the test. Man, if only you had time, right before this incident to go ahead and train them. If only there was like this incident that happened and you had some time to actually go ahead and do this then and try and work out the kinks then. Man, if only I had that time. As the days pass and spring turns to summer, the attacks continue. Every week seems to bring news of some fresh outrage, another group of travelers robbed on the road, another storehouse or barn raided. The roaming merchants, normally so common in the summer, do not dare to risk coming to your fief now, and some of your tenants are even too afraid even to go to their own fields for fear of being attacked. As the attacks continue with no end in sight, you begin to see signs of panic among your tenants. They are not obvious ones, but you've seen the like before. In Antar, among a village in fear of being despoiled, shutters locked closed in spite of the heat, wary eyes being kept outwards towards the woods, pouches of coins and boxes of valuables being buried in front yards and back gardens to keep them out of the hands of any potential pillagers. All you can do now is train your ramshackle little militia as best you can, hoping they will be ready to fight and die when things get worse. Yet as the Roadsmen continue their depredations through the height of summer, it becomes clear just how bad things may be about to get. The village square, once full of stalls and hawkers and human voices, is now almost deserted. Fear stalks the land. The fields are almost entirely deserted now. With each fresh new raid, the Roadsmen seem to grow bolder. Now they range almost to the village itself, attacking and robbing anyone who strays too far from the settled heart of your fief, and leaving marks of their presence carved in fence posts and barn doors. Brazen acts of defiance against your ability to protect your tenants and their property. As the news seems to draw you ever closer, some of your tenants begin to lose their resolve. Faced with the choice of staying in a village under siege or taking their chances and braving the brigands on the roads out, they begin to seriously consider the latter. It is only perhaps through reticence of fear of the perilous roads out that none of your tenants have already packed up and left. You suppose you should consider yourself lucky in that regard, but that luck will not hold if you continue to allow the Roadsmen to make bold with your fief without resistance or retribution. If you do not, the surely more and more of your tenants will begin to consider the idea of flight, however risky, superior to the alternative. You must find a way to deal with this threat, and soon, or you may find yourself the only one left. Okay. I must send an urgent message to the intendancy, demanding aid. If tenants are leaving, then the solution is simple. I tell them not to. I must focus all my efforts into preparing my house guard. I order my departing tenants to pass the Roadsmen a message that I am still willing to talk. Well, I've already started the house guard thing now, so I guess I'm just gonna have to continue with it. Yeah. It also would have been nice if that's one of the things that I could have worked on as far as managing the barony. The defense of the barony. That would have been a nice thing. But well, these are the choices. Continue with the house guard. As far as you're concerned, there is only one way to force a conclusion to your situation now: to prepare your house guards as thoroughly as possible for an open confrontation before sending them into the forest to either defeat the Roadsmen or force them to seek less well-armed prey. Yet even after weeks of drill, it is clear that your makeshift fighting force still has a long way to go. They can form ranks now and move into straight lines without entangling themselves amongst each other, which you suppose is a vast improvement over their initial condition. Yet still, the sight of them parading in the open seems still more a scene of farce than martial ardor, and despite your best efforts, much of your force remains slow to accept discipline, if not outright insolent in their resistance to orders. They may be your tenants, and you may be their lord and gentleman of the blood, but it is clear that they remain steadfastly opposed to the idea that they have been reduced to nothing more than unquestioning common soldiers in the power of a high-born officer. And that is the least of your problems. Even perfect drill and discipline would be of little use without the equipment needed to take advantage of them. While you doubt the Roadsmen are as well armed as the men you commanded in Antar, you have little doubt that they are far more formidably equipped than your gaggle of half-trained farmers and their odd assortment of hunting pieces and farming implements. As things are, you fear that your improvised force will stand little chance against a gang of violent, hardened criminals. You'll have to effect some great improvements indeed if you mean to rectify their sorry state of affairs. Let's see, how much money do I have? I have 867 crowns right now. And I need subordinate leaders. Because I feel like even if I tried to buy weapons, that might not turn out well. But then again, having weapons would probably be better in this situation. And weapons are pay. Weapons are pay. Let's try weapons. If there is any egregious shortage facing your improvised militia, it is that of proper weaponry and the ammunition with which to load it with. Few of your recruits have brought with them real weapons. Most are still armed with farm implements and improvised spears. Even with the contents of your gun room distributed to the makeshift force, barely half of your men are in possession of working firelocks, and few of them have more than a half a dozen cartridges to shoot with. In truth, you would not have been particularly happy in leading so poorly armed a party to hunt fowl, let alone a pack of violent brigands. If you are to face the Roadsmen on anywhere near equal terms, then you shall have to secure additional firearms and enough powder and shot to allow your men to practice with them until they become proficient in their use. There are additional guns and ammunition to be had within your fief, of course. It is not so rare for the residents of a country baron to keep a musket or a fowling piece for hunting, or a pistol for disquietus times like these. But you cannot simply walk into their cottages and take them. They are the private possessions of your tenants, and for all that they live within your power, you will be well outside your rights to rob them. Instead, you must acquire the needed arms by less forceful means. You make the announcement that you are willing to pay good coin for any tenant willing to sell their firearms and ammunition to you. It works after a fashion. Within a day, your tenants begin bringing their firelocks to your house. With Saundersley at your side, you look over each nearly submitted piece and negotiate what you believe to be a fair price for each. By the end of the week, you've acquired nearly 24 muskets, fowling pieces, pistols, and carbines, along with over 200 cartridges and enough powder and shot to make up 200 more. Unfortunately, very few of your newly purchased arms are in any state to be used. Some are the victims of years, if not decades, of neglect. Their barrels rust-pitted, their flint screws missing, their springs and hinges sometimes entirely rusted shut. Most will require long hours of hard work to get them in any shape to be fired, and a few have to simply be discarded as beyond help. Yet even so, after a week of scrubbing, polishing, fitting, and hammering, you have enough firelocks available at last to fully equip your entire house guard. Now, at least when it comes to an equipment, your men will be equal to your enemies. Now you can only do your best to ensure that they will be equal in discipline and mettle as well. Okay. That's 717 crowns. Let's go ahead and get some subordinate leaders. It is not so difficult to command a body of 50 or even 100 men in battle, provided they are marching in close order and in open field, without obstacles to break up the even ranks. A company of foot or even a squadron of horse at a walk or a trot can seem little more than a single shape, maneuvering with all the neatness of a block on a map. But you do not intend for your house guard to fight like a company of line infantry. No, to prevail against the Roadsmen in the forest, you will need to fight like them, moving up in open order, firing from cover, advancing in small groups from this tree trunk here to the lee of that rock there. For such work, the presence of steady and trusted non-commissioned officers is vital. Corporals and sergeants capable of reading the flow of battle, of seeking out the enemy's weakness, of seizing the initiative with nothing more than a look and a word, in the sluggish dance of a set-piece battle. Such men make the difference between a good army and an excellent one. But in the quickly changing chaos of the skirmish, such men are the difference between victory and annihilation. You are desperate You are in desperate need of such men, but you know that they will not come forward without some incentive. So you go through the ranks of your house guard and pick the 5 fellows who seem the best suited to the task. You offer them the respect and prestige of leadership. You offer them responsibility over their fellow men, and you offer them a substantial cash bonus just in case nobler motives did not appeal to them. They accept, of course, to a man. The men you had chosen to help you lead your house guard were not the obvious candidates. You did not pick the oldest or the wealthiest or the most respected or even the most physically fit, for you knew that it was none of those things which made a good leader. No, you had looked into their eyes and searched for what had lain beneath, that elusive quality which separated the leaders from the followers. You had chosen them for their energy, their coolness, their strength of will. Within a week, it becomes clear that you had chosen well. Men gravitate naturally to those who look like they know what they're doing, and your chosen leaders quickly demonstrate a knack for it. Even though you know that they have had no more training or preparation than their fellows, they fall into the role of authority you have granted them easily, leading their men in drills, taking their side in quarrels, helping them up when they fall, and employing the stern hand of discipline upon them when they stray. Led by such men, you have little doubt that your force will soon be able to face your foes on even terms. The question is whether that will be enough for them to win. Oof. Then one morning, you awake to fresh and terrible news. No longer content to simply prey on travelers coming in and out of your fief, the roadsmen have blocked all 3 roads out entirely. Barricades of stout logs cut off 2 of the roads. A third is less a blockade and more a fortified camp, with walls of timber, an abattis of branches, and even the sight of cook fires and tins beyond. God, how could you allow this? If you were under a figurative state of siege before, you are under a literal one now. Your tenants are far from pleased, of course, but they almost seem to take their newly worsened situation in stride. Long months of living under a declared state of emergency appears to have worked to prepare them for the shock of seeing the roads blocked off by armed men, both mentally and physically. Your tenants have been readying themselves for this eventuality for the whole of the summer. Now that it has arrived, business almost goes on as usual. Yet while your tenants grit themselves with a grim determination, you find yourself incomprehensibly high spirits. Incomprehensibly high spirits. Good God. Instead of weighing on your mind, the ongoing crisis has sharpened it. The constant threat of armed foes in the forest less than an hour's ride from your bed has filled you with a nervous energy. The burden of being responsible for the lives and deaths of those who entrusted their lives and fortune to their care brings you back to a state of familiar, almost natural focus. Why, it is almost as if you were once again at war. See, danger has become a natural habit. What can I do but embrace it? Well, this is part of who I am. I may not like it, but I'll not deny it either. You are not so insensible to your own disposition as to think that your time in Antar has not changed your way of thinking. No man can survive as severe and harrowing an ordeal as a dozen years of war and not have his attitude changed. However, not a brute animal either. To be made wholly a product of one's own conditions, the war in Antar had made you change the way you think, but it is your decision whether to accept those changes or not. While it may be true that your years as a king's officer have made the state of mortal peril indifferent or even welcoming to you, that does not mean that you cannot choose to repudiate the way of thinking now that your days as a soldier are in your past. Perhaps you may find yourself embracing that part of you which had been forged in the fires of battle, and not that more peaceable form which you are expected to maintain now that you are once again at home. But it will be your choice to do so, just as it shall be your choice to determine your response to the conclusion which you now find yourself facing. Had the roadsmen contented themselves to merely preying upon the occasional traveler, then their depredations might have been endured, at least for the season. But by cutting off your fief from the outside world entirely, they have placed you and your tenants in an untenable situation. With the harvest only a few weeks away, you will need to clear the road so your tenants may take their produce to market. Otherwise, the people of your fief will have little means to earn money with which to pay you their rents, or purchase the tools, seed, and other necessities that they will need for the next year. In short, if the Roadsmen are not driven out of the barony, your fief may face a complete economic collapse. It has become a clear-cut question of you or them. Your options are all profoundly imperfect ones. First of all, there's the choice of simply staying put and awaiting aid from the intendancy, an unlikely prospect given that you have neither appraised them of your situation or given them any warning whatsoever regarding your circumstances. For all that you know, the Royal Intendancy Office in Crittenden may not even be aware that your fief is dealing with the Roadsmen at all. Good God, what the hell is Royal Intelligence doing? Alternatively, you have more direct options. You've made some effort in keeping your martial skills in fettle these past 2 years. Now might be a chance to use them. Now that the Roadsmen have shown themselves in the open, you could confront them directly with your house guard. They have come a long way since you first embodied them. Though they are far below the standard of any professional soldier worthy of the name, they are at least well armed enough and perhaps even well trained enough to drive off your foes. Whether they would be able to do so without taking heavy, bloody losses is another question entirely. Lastly, there is perhaps the riskiest option of all. You could approach the Roadsmen and ask to negotiate. There is no doubt that some of your tenants would see it as an act of surrender, and any talks resulting as the mere discussion regarding terms thereof. However, it is also the only way you might extricate you and your fief out of your current situation without either dependency on some outside source of aid or some great effusion of blood. Of course, you have little idea as to how the brigands themselves might react. They might be quite willing to discuss matters, or they might simply shoot you down as you approach. After all, you have done nothing to demonstrate good faith or a desire to negotiate over the past few months. They might just as easily see your sudden change of heart as a delaying tactic or even a trap. No course of action is without its risk. None of your potential choices are without disadvantages. Yet, with so much at risk, all you can do is pick the ones least likely to fail. Okay. I am going to deploy the house guard, but again, it's one of those things I just feel iffy about. I mean, you should have had time before this. You should have been able to build up your house guard and stuff before this. You should have been able to, well, of course you can work on your house and stuff like that, but I just feel like there's some steps that's been skipped here. And we just kind of got straight into it. And also, again, I kind of find it odd that Royal Intelligence has no idea of what's going on and stuff like that. Or maybe they do. But I mean, they keep reports on just about everybody. So why would they not keep a report on somebody who's fast ranking in the military, who has ties to certain people? Even when you start off the game in certain, if you start off the game with certain pre-made characters, it's literally a report from Royal Intelligence. So I find it odd that they wouldn't know about it and they wouldn't make some type of contact about it. But I don't know, maybe they got bigger things to worry about, and I guess they figure you can handle it. But I will. Deploy the house guard. Let us finish this with fire and steel. This is probably going to be a shit show. And I wish that there was actually some type of strategy to this. I hope there's more strategy to this. I would like to kind of draw them out and fight, not actually fight in the woods and stuff, but oh well. There's no more time for deliberation, no more time for delay. Your foes have come into the open, and every part of you knows that now you must face their challenge directly, immediately. Every day you allow yourself to sit inactive on your estate will serve only to dishearten your people and embolden theirs. Now, you must act now. Not when you first did the state of emergency, not all that time a long time ago. You have to act now after you've let everything completely go to shit. You put on your best uniform in the pre-dawn gloom, buckling on your helmet as the sun rises. For a moment, you consider putting on your armor and taking your bane-ruined sword with you, but only for a moment. Armor would be more a hindrance than a help in the thick underbrush, and you've no desire to set your own forest ablaze with the flames from your own enchanted sword. Instead, you settle for your saber and pistol before heading out into the late summer morning ready for war. You know, actually, I don't know. I think I would consider it, actually, considering the fact that this is their turf to a certain degree. You know, a partial burning of the forest might not be such a bad idea, actually. So, yeah. and it would at the very least strike some terror in them, seeing that their own force, that their own encampment is on fire, and then on top of that, it's from with a Bane ruined, heavily armed soldier from the war. So yeah, that might be a terrifying prospect. But okay. You call out your house guard and assemble them in the village square. They are not ready for battle, not by any definition, but you're out of time. They will have to do what you demand of them or die in the trying. You march them out of the village up the main road to where you know the roadsmen have their central camp as good an order as you can muster. You can see the nerves take hold as you look into the faces of your improvised little force. They grip their weapons with white-knuckled hands, their eyes flicking side to side as if known death might come at any moment. You can almost hear the shudders in their breaths, feel the excited tremble of their limbs, see the nervous looks in their eyes. You feel it too. It never really goes away, not even after the 100th battle, but it does become familiar, almost comfortable, the slipping on of an old coat. Yes, the old battle tension comes over you too, hot and cold at the same time. If you are fortunate today, you may never have to feel it again. You are still 250 paces from the trees when someone fires the first shot. You see the flash and puff of powder smoke before you hear the sound. The ball itself falls short, far too short, smacking into the road more than a dozen paces ahead of you with a puff of dirt. When the sound comes, it comes as one which you have heard all too many times before. You do not even flinch, but your house guard recoil with shock, as if they had in unison been slapped hard in the face. Some stumble backwards, others go reeling. A few dive to the ground, barely holding on to their weapons. One or two level their own firelocks as if to reply. Only your shouted orders stop them from wasting their powder. You ought to have known. For all that you have trained them, your makeshift force has never been under fire before. You may know the enemy is far out of range, that the chances of being hit at 250 paces is about the same as being struck by lightning, but your men don't. To them, a single shot at 200 paces seems as deadly as a battalion volley at 20. There's no helping it. Instead, you focus your efforts on getting your men moving again, back on their feet. Yet every time you get them advancing, another shot echoes from the forest, and the whole thing falls apart again. And it is another half minute of shouting, shiving, and waving to get them going again. To you, the danger seems obvious. You are only 150 paces away now. At such a range, a decent shot might have a 1 in 5 chance of hitting a man. If even a wide miss is enough to bring your men to a halt, what will they do once their fellows is actually struck? Another puff of smoke, another sharp crack. The ball goes high, just close enough to clip the plume of your helmet. Again, your men reel. This is how attacks fail. You've seen it happen before, not just to half-trained militia, but to veteran infantry as well. Faced with enemy fire, the attackers let paralysis sink in. Good God. Too proud to run, too terrified to charge home, they stand trapped in betwixt two extremes as the enemy pick them off one by one until the shredded remnants finally break. Your fingers clench inside your riding gloves. Your left hand tightens around the hilt of your saber. You cannot allow that to happen here. There's too much at stake. There must be something you could do. Well, my intelligence is far better than my charisma, so let me step back and see if I can find a better way forward. You will go nowhere like this. If you insist on exposing yourself by pushing up the road, your men will keep ducking and scattering with the sound of every coming musket ball. You are just as likely to be shot to pieces as to reach the forest. You must find a better way. You fall back for a moment, leaving your men to advance past you. You rack your brain for solutions. Just as another musket ball buzzes past, your eyes catch on the puff of smoke rising from the tree line as it momentarily obscures. Wait, that's it. House guard, you bellow. Volley fire. Your men level their incongruous collection of firelocks and let loose a ragged, splintery volley, filling the air with noise and smoke and fire. You doubt they have hit anything, but you don't need them to. House guard, advance. You lead your men onwards, ears cocked for any sound of return fire as you push through the thick smoke, until it begins to dissipate. You look back at your men still half hidden in the smoke. House guard, reload, and fire. The smoke begins to spread thin in the still summer air as your men prime locks and ram cartridges home. It's almost gone by the time the first of your ragtag militia are ready to fire again. It comes too haphazard for even the most generous observer to call it a volley, but it does the trick. Suddenly, the thin haze of powder smoke is joined by fresh clouds of smoke, hiding your force in the billowing, choking fog once more. It is by such a manner that you advance under the cover of your own powder smoke, pausing every 5 or 10 paces to let off a fresh volley. It takes a long time, and your men soon grow dangerously short of ammunition, but it works. Unable to spot anything but the barest outline of your men in the artificial fog, they do not fire again. By the time you reach the tree line, whatever roadsmen which had once been there are long gone. Now there is nothing to it but to press on. You lead your men deeper into the forest, steeling yourself for the confrontation you know is to come. The sound of musketry rattles out afresh from ahead. Not a single shot, but a full, ragged volley. Balls buzz through the air around you and slam into the trees beside you with splintery thuds. Someone behind you lets out a cry and tumbles to the hard roadbed. Your men keep moving forward, but not for long. By the time a second volley rings out, they are all in cover behind fallen logs and tree trunks, poking out of their cover only to reply with musketry of their own. Few powers in creation will get them moving forward again now. Ahead you can see the brigand camp, the low logs of its barricade and the thick branches of its abatis lying directly astride the road in ominous defiance. Beside them, your foes huddle behind their walls, peeking over the top only to fire. A quick survey of the situation tells you what you had already suspected. You are at an impasse, a stalemate which neither side is willing to break. Your men have the numbers, but the roadsmen have superior cover and positioning. Whoever sited their makeshift fortifications certainly knew his business. If you persist in this exchange of musketry, your foes may finally be whittled down to a point where they would be compelled to surrender for want of the number of defend against an assault. However, you will no doubt lose more men than they, and it may be just as likely that your half-trained militia will find itself broken by the losses that they will inevitably take. You are losing men with every volley now, tumbling back with gaping wounds in their sides, and the splinters of shattered trees sticking out grotesquely from their limbs. If you mean to persist in such a clash, then only more will follow. If you mean to do anything else, then you must do it now before you have too few men remaining to allow for any possible alternative. Once again, might have been a good time to turn around and have your armor, but all right. Let me see. Let me see. I mean, I feel like an assault would be bad. At the same time, if I sit here, I may run out of ammo. Ugh. And I'm gonna lose a lot of men, and I'm not a good fighter, so that's not gonna help either. Yeah, my soldiering is a 32, so I don't know if I actually have a high enough stat to pull this off. Crap. Screw it. I mean, worst case scenario, it fails. I'll go back and do it again. So, yep. Now's the time to end it. I take the Roadsmen camp by storm. Let's see. You wait for the right moment, counting the seconds as you watch the Roadsmen prepare and fire off another volley. Now, while they're reloading, you step out into the open, saber held high. House guard. You cry, "Charge!" Your men follow as you rush forward, but tentatively, hesitantly, their weapons held before them like talisman. They stall before the abatis as if the branches and brambles were edged with knives. "Forward!" you shout as you begin hacking away at the obstructions with your saber with a frantic desperation. "Forward, damn your eyes!" You must get through the abatis before the roadsmen have a chance to reload. If your men are caught by a volley here, barely half a dozen paces from the enemy, the result will be horrific. Finally, some of your fellows begin to attack the abattis too, prying loose the branches with the butts of their muskets or chopping at branches with axes. But it's too late. As one, the Roadsmen rise from behind their log barricades, muskets in hand. Creation shatters as the air fills with flames and smoke. You see men around you jerk and fall as the deafening thunder of musketry sets your ears ringing. Already your men are falling back, running for their lives. Those who can still run, others stagger away, clutching bloody, gaping holes in their bodies, eyes wide with fear. A cry rises from behind the log barricade, an exultant animal howl. The Roadsmen clamber over their ramshackle fortifications, their hands clutching long knives, hatchets, and swords, their eyes bright with fury, their face contorted and twisted with the bloodthirst of a victorious army about to wreak vengeance upon its beaten foes. The last of your men, still holding firm, take only one look in the eyes of their howling assailants before turning to run, leaving you alone against the screaming, murderous throng. And then you are running too. You do not know when you stop running, only that you are out of breath and your legs are weak under you. The tree line is far behind you, yet you do not remember coming out of the forest. There is a rent in your sleeves too, a red gash still oozing blood. You do not remember getting that either. All around, the remnants of your house guard are much the same, gasping for air, stumbling away in confused trajectories, their eyes wide, their faces numb. They are no longer a coherent force, they are simply fugitives, each happening to share a field with a handful of others no less frightened and shocked than they. A look over your shoulder reassures you that the Roadsmen are not pursuing, at least not anymore. Yet there is no question of rallying your men and sending them back into the forest. They have faced the Roadsmen once, and the experience has broken them. Perhaps for the hour, perhaps for the day, perhaps for the rest of their lives. They will not enter those woods again, not while the newly wrought stuff of nightmare still lurks in the shadows. So instead, you trudge on exhausted, as a loose straggling mass back to the village. This is not the first time you've run from a battle. You still remember the abortive skirmish a few weeks after Blagia, when your green squadron had been routed by an Antari force a fraction of its size. But you've never told anybody about that, not in real detail. You've never told anybody about that day, just as you know your men will never tell anyone about this one. But they don't have to. When the remnants of your force begin straggling into your village in ones and twos, your other tenants need only to see the expression in their faces and the vacant look in their eyes to understand the enormity of the disaster which has befallen you, the disaster which you led them to. More of your beaten house guards stagger back to the village as the hours pass, no less dazed and shocked as the others. You count them as they arrive in their ones and twos, past the throngs of anxious folks looking for their friends and loved ones. You count them through the morning and into the afternoon until it becomes clear that no more are coming. Only then does the scale of your defeat becomes evident. Of the 24 men you had led in the morning, half of them have not returned. No army in the history of creation could have considered such losses anything less than a catastrophe. To the people of your fief, so unused to death save in the most rare and singular occasion, it is a scale of mortality unheard of. One family has lost both their sons. Another has lost 3. There seems to be not a single household in your fief who is not in mourning, who has not lost a friend or a loved one, and they all blame you. It was you who had given the order to embody the house guard. It was you who made the decision to face the Roadsmen directly. It was you who led them to their deaths, and you had lived while they had died. Yet it soon becomes clear that to the people of your fief, not even that is the greatest of your offenses. For when you and what was left of your force fled, you have left your wounded and dead behind. Now they are still deep in the forest in the hands of the enemy, where they are likely never to be seen again. It is enough to look into the eyes of those who have lost loved ones today to know that in them you have become a greater object of hate than the Roadsmen. The Brigands had only robbed them of their valuables and coin. You have taken from them their sons and fathers, husbands and brothers, and you have not given them back bodies for them to burn. All throughout the remainder of the summer and autumn, the Roadsmen keep your fief in their tight grim. Not cart or man comes or leaves without being robbed of all their valuables, In the end, it is not any effort on your part but the weather which finally dislodges the brigands. As the days grow shorter and colder, and the autumn rains begin in earnest, the roadsmen at last abandon their barricade for winter quarters, taking with them all of their ill-gotten plunder. By then, the harvest season is almost over. Those who had held out hope of selling their surplus crops this year had been comprehensively disappointed. The year's harvest is a mean, wretched thing where nobody seems to be happy. Despite their best efforts, the festival's council's uncommonly shabby preparations provide not a setting for Thanksgiving or celebration, but for anxiety over the coming months, misery over that which has been lost, and there's anger, a great deal of it almost wholly directed at you. At the beginning of the summer, you had doubled the rents in the promise that it would give you the resources to deal with the roadsmen. Having nearly beggared themselves to meet your demands, you can show them nothing for their efforts, save for a most comprehensive failure. The past season has done much damage to your fief, and not just in the purely material sense. Your failure to protect your people from the depredations of the roadsmen has done no small amount of harm to your standing. Having proven incapable of fulfilling the most basic duty of your lordship, your competence, and even your very legitimacy of are being called into question. You must consider some course of actions to restore confidence in your abilities and perhaps alleviate the suffering your tenants have endured these past months. Let me see. You know what? I'll just give a speech. I'm not giving them the damn money back. They sat there and didn't do a thing the entire time, and I had to pay them to even try and get them to do anything in the first place. So yeah, a speech. Some might consider it an empty gesture to answer the manifest displeasure and hardships of your people with nothing more than a few words in the village square, but you know that even a handful of phrases delivered in the right frame of mind and in the right sentiment might inspire even the most dispirited folk. It will not take away their suffering and their anxieties, but it may put them out of mind for even just a little while. That alone may be effective enough. So you assemble your tenants in the village square, and despite their manifestly unfriendly attitude, you begin to speak. It does not go well. Despite your best efforts to address your tenants' anxieties, everything you say only seems to make things worse. Your mentions of the roadsmen only bring to their minds your failure to dispose of them. Your appeal to their duty only brings the reply that you had failed yours in the protection of your fief and its people. Yeah, I guess I'm just supposed to protect it with my ass. As for any talk of the future, it only seems to remind them of the hard time which are sure to be ahead. With every abortive attempt, the crowd grows angrier and angrier. In the end, it perhaps only the vestiges of deference to your title and the station that prevent your engaged tenants from laying hands upon you. Quickly, you conclude with the most inoffensive remarks you can muster and beat a hasty retreat. It seems that instead of improving matters, your speech has done the exact opposite. Your tenants will forgive you eventually, you suppose. It is not as they could run your barony without you. After all, however, judging by the looks on their faces, it would not be anytime soon. So until that time comes, you can do little but spend your time indoors and wait for the compound effect of your failure to deal with the roadsmen and your bots of undress to blow over. Well, there you go. Let me see. The opening of the roads brings something else with it too. A few days after the high harvest, the intendancy courier arrives, laden as usual with his pouch of letters, reports, bills, and back copies of the Gazette. It is this last part of his burden which you seize upon most eagerly. You have heard little of the wide world outside your fief these past few months. The roadsmen had cut you off from the flow of information just as thoroughly and violently as they had cut you off from passage of commerce. Only the barest and vaguest rumors and innuendo had managed to slip through, and those could obviously not be credited as reliable. So, as with some anticipation that you set the stack back copies on your desk and begin to go through them. They do not make for comforting reading. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. I'll probably end up going back and playing this again to come up with the better option in this. But yeah, there are some finicky things that I don't really like there. I don't like that there's no type of, way to improve the defense other than the defense of your home, the walls. I don't know what role that would actually play as far as like this goes, and it might not even play a role. But that just seems a little odd that you don't have any type of option to really improve your defense or to do anything beforehand. You literally just sit at the home and wait for them to attack you. That just seems a little, well, stupid, quite frankly. I mean, why would you let them do that? Why wouldn't you send out scouts before that? Why wouldn't you try to get people, ahead of this? And once again, and maybe this changes when you have different characters or something like that, but it just seems a little odd to me that, like, if you have a military minded character who just came home, the first thing you would think that they would do is think about the defense of their home, the security of their people, and stuff like that. But maybe it's a different time, maybe it's a different setting, I don't know. So, but we'll go ahead and see what happens in the next episode, and we will go ahead and see what happens when we actually succeed in this. So if you liked the video, like the video. If you would like to see more content like this, subscribe. I have a lot of things on the channel. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to leave it in the comment section, and I will get to it as quickly as I possibly can. So thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. See ya.